people with nothing find a way. It's just a matter of like you said, planning and kind of figuring out how you can collaborate, right? Like there's almost always a way, because you'll be surprised if you look at these people, you're like, where you started from and how you got there. There's always a story. And if our families can come from like immigrants from like literally a country where they, like my parents didn't even know English.
Oh.
So to build something without doing a damn word here,
That's
what's our excuse?
Yeah. What's up, y'all? It's your boy DJ Busby.
And it's your boy JKD.
And from the time you hear the voices, you know it's only up from here. It's the Up From Here podcast. And we're back with another one.
Yes, sir.
Very special one and an extremely important one today. Along the years, just living life, you get to see certain wage gaps, right? Society's built with various people from all walks of life. Some people inherit these large amounts of money. Some people work really hard for it. Some people have advantages, etc. But you could generally see in societies these days, there's wealth gaps. And one that's very important to us because it's our community and our culture is the West Indian community. So one thing we want to make sure to at least facilitate in terms of the conversation is how do we bring ourselves out or decrease the wage gap, so to speak? How do we bring ourselves out of financial hurdles, out of financial troubles, or at least start that conversation? So JKD and I could only give our advice based off of our experiences. Right. But as we continue to say, we are not experts, people. We are not experts by any means. So we wanted to bring somebody who has practice in the financial field. She may live and breathe finances. So this is somebody you guys definitely want us to listen to. So without further ado, we have none other than Subanya in the building.
That was the best introduction. Thank you very much.
We got one there.
Yeah.
How are you doing first and foremost?
Good. And I love everything you touched on right there, because I think I was just speaking to someone on the way here about this is a lot of people very easily are discouraged. And I think one of, not to say the easiest, but one of the most common ways that people are building wealth is through real estate. So if it wasn't clear, I do work in the mortgage space. I am a mortgage broker. So every day I'm working with different diverse aspects of this space, where some people, like you said, have the bank of mom and dad to support them through the exercise. And some people I've been working with for a year, helping them get to where they need to be to now be able to purchase, which obviously it's a great feeling for me as well to know that you may not have the support or someone here to help you, aid you through that, but educating. And that's the great part that you guys are doing this. I love that you're doing this, because education is everything. As long you don't know what you don't know, and everything you know will help you get there faster.
Absolutely. And a lot of times it just takes that nudge, or it takes that little piece of information to set you off in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Now, before we really get into this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, I need every single person listening to this to listen to every single word of our special guest. You want to know why?
Why?
She came out here. It's your birthday, am I wrong? It's her actual birthday. I didn't know. These are one of those things where, like, I messaged her, hey, it'd be cool if you were on this. And she said, yeah, no problem. It's her birthday today, no?
It is.
We just want to say happy birthday before we get the thing started.
Thank you. But honestly, when you messaged me and you even said this is something we want to use the platform for, I was like, this is amazing, because I think that is such a huge gap. And the only way we're going to fill that gap is through educating. And it's a topic very near and dear to me. So thank you guys for having me.
Not a problem. So to get things started, I want to kick it off here. We just generally spoke about issues that maybe our community might be facing in terms of shortening the wealth gap.
Yeah.
You don't know how to fix something unless you can identify what needs to be fixed.
Absolutely.
So let's start there. In your experience of helping various people, especially within our community, what are, certain starting points to even be aware that you might be in a financial strain?
So I think the big thing everyone talks about obviously is credit. Even when it comes to credit, it's not to say you can't use your credit card. There's little things like some people think, okay, I won't use my credit card. You actually need to use your credit card to build credit. Another piece is so it's a great conversation starter. Talking to someone as early as you can to have that conversation about what do I need to do to put myself in the best position to then be able to leverage the power of real estate. So something that came up just recently, actually, I'm talking to a client who is a soon-to-be first-time home buyer. The credit was a little bit on the cusp, and what we realized was they were using their lowest credit card, so the lowest interest on that credit card only. They do have 3 other credit cards, but utilization, so the percentage of utilization impacts your credit score. So keeping that under 30%, and the regular payment, so it's not just the regular payment. So just something as simple as taking that balance and diversifying and putting it under 30% on now 2 cards. Almost immediately, I was like, keep an eye on your credit. It's been 2 months now. They went from a 640 to now a 720.
Wow.
Nice.
And that, like with the banks, the rates, if you're a first-time home buyer, you want to keep those monthly payments. So you want to make sure you're in the best position when you move forward, that you can move forward and that things don't hit the fan at the last minute. So just little things like that, being educated on what are tips and tricks that you can be doing now, and even using your credit, showing that you can pay on time versus I'm going to have 0 debt. I'm just going to focus on this and do absolutely nothing else. Then when you do purchase and you take on a large mortgage, they're like, it's great. You have 0 debt, but do you have the financial literacy to make sure you're paying regularly? So things like that really, really do help. And then obviously the biggest one is down payment. Right. And yes, there's lots of people who can tap into Bank of Mom and Dad and refinance a property and kind of do that, but not everybody can do that. Yeah. For them, it's just understanding the insurance rules really well.
So you would say in terms of getting out of financial issues, the best way is to focus on, I guess, what you can do at a certain point in time, which is accumulate quote unquote bills and paying them off on time to show a certain level of responsibility.
Exactly. And you can use your car, your phone bills. Those are still things that we can show. You're paying things on time. Right. Even if you have one credit card, but you're paying your car insurance, your car loan, your phone bill, those are all things we can leverage. So it's just kind of knowing what you can use towards that. And then obviously such a typical mortgage broker thing to don't finance a car right away if you don't need to. You stay within your means for the time being, because part of it is short-term pain, long-term gain. That gap is going to exist. You kind of get through what you can right now to get, like you said, build that wealth a little bit faster. And real estate, for many, many reasons, is one of the fastest ways that people do kind of fill that gap.
Nice. I know you talked about credit. Are there things that people are doing currently now that they think they're building credit, but it's actually not? Building?
So, absolutely. So that was actually kind of the that I touched on, is even making sure they think just using one card versus not, right, or 0 versus not. Okay. That does obviously not help. Right. But increasing the limit, so you might think that you get those offers where it says, do you want to increase your credit limit? And you're like, no, I don't even use my credit card because I'm working on my credit score. But when you increase it, obviously with keeping in mind you don't want to use it, but you're going to increase it. So if I had a $1,000 credit card, the 30% is $300. Right. Now, if I have a $5,000 credit card and I'm using $300, to them, my utilization is way lower than 30%. Right. My credit score is just building at that point because I am accepting it. The one thing that we do recommend, and this is kind of when you're purchasing, don't accept it at that time. Because that time when they do it, they pull your credit, and that kind of will get a little wonky because it's a new inquiry. Right. But doing it leading up to your purchase, and that's where you say, have those conversations as early as you can to make sure you're in the best position that you can be in to be able to get into a property. Right.
Because I know some of my friends and colleagues, they use their credit card as debit cards. So they would, for example, go to a gas station, pay for gas, and then instantly they'll just pay their credit card. Right. Does that help build credit as well?
Yeah, so that does help. And something you can also do is actually pay it twice a month. So typically if you pay it on the 15th and the 30th, when the reset happens every month, it's assessing that. Okay. So it is, as much as it's being used, it's assessing that you are also paying it within those periods that you need to pay it. And you're not just getting away with paying the bare minimum and just kind of, that's how you're managing your finances. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Exactly. Nice. Okay. And from a tax standpoint there, if you do have a business, just as disclaimer for tax, I'm not an expert in taxes by any means. I just obviously see the tax documents quite often, but for a lot of people who are business for self, because again, one of the ways people are building wealth is they're not, I was like, I shouldn't be saying this, but they're not paying a ton to the government. Right. Or they're very strategic in what they're doing. And it obviously helps because if that's an expense towards your business versus you using your debit card, that is
Right.
now something when you are doing your taxes, there's a bit of tax benefits for you. So
Okay.
like not only saving and buying real estate, but there's obviously filling the wealth gap through things, strategic financing, right? Just
Right.
where you can save on taxes, where you can leverage things to even when you're purchasing a property, positioning in a way where you're paying less taxes.
Okay. Okay.
So something else I wanted to touch on when it gets to, you diving into this and making it a profession. A lot of people will go into certain fields and there's a reason behind that. There's a reason why they pursued a certain field or whatever the case is. Let's talk about your starting points, your origins, even before you got into being into, finances and mortgages and whatnot. How did you get into that space? How were you raised? Like those type of...
Yeah, no, so
Those
my
type of
background
stories.
is actually in healthcare.
Cool.
Leading up to when I moved into mortgages, I was actually, my background is medicinal chemistry. I worked in the healthcare space, and I actually worked in it up until COVID.
Oh, wow.
I think for me, where it kind of changed was really because I moved into the research side of things, and there, as much as you are, yes, in fact, like you're doing things that work towards the data and the analytics, and we were actually working on the commercialization of drugs, for instance. It didn't feel like a one-to-one of where I was helping someone right away. Though long-term, obviously there was that benefit.
Right.
So when I made a pivot, it originally was intended to be part-time. I have a lot of family in real estate, and it's funny, the comment you made in the beginning was pretty spot on, because I come from a descent where we seeked asylum. We left everything we had to come to this country and start all over.
Wow.
And my parents, they're mortgage free, and they went through that exercise. But for them, debt is scary. I think when you come from nothing and even taking on the debt that they did, it was scary for them. So the only focus was paying it down.
Right.
And then being surrounded by people in my family, the next generation, where they are more likely to take risks to do what they need to do, because it's not survival mode so much anymore. But we've seen the hardship of our parents, and how do we now give them a better life?
Right.
So being surrounded around my family, my sister was in real estate, my brother was in real estate, all of us were in real estate, and it was just, how can I support the business? And that's how it started, intended to be kind of part-time. Very quickly, I realized, for me, part of the reason I liked healthcare was almost immediately feeling like I can help someone, which wasn't working so much now that I'm in the commercialization. But my first client, she was actually going through a divorce. And I guess this one, it was more of an emotional mortgage. It wasn't just, hey, I bought a property, but she was going through a divorce. She went into default. She straight up told me her husband managed everything. She actually just let everything plummet at that point. And we worked together for almost a year to help clean up her finances, get her out. And that, for me, was one of the best deals.
Yeah.
It's
So
rewarding.
it took a year to get her out of the kind of, I was going to swear, to get her out of
doing so good.
to get her out of the negative circumstances.
Yeah. Can imagine what that swear word was. Way more. Yeah, good.
But it really was. It was very, very rewarding, because, and for her too, she was incredibly grateful, but just knowing her life is going to be significantly better because of this, as well as her children, who are also impacted as a result of everything that happened.
wow.
And that was a bit of my turning point. And then obviously for me, it was also, what's the fastest way now I can close this wealth gap? And I realized it's actually this. And part of it is it becomes easier to do it every single day. Like I work, honestly, I'll start the day at 5 a.m, and I will, even after this, I will be working.
Wow.
But for me, it's a very fulfilling job where, yes, I'm working for myself, so it's tangible to me. That's part of me closing the wealth gap.
Okay.
Beautiful.
That's how I ended up here, and now I'm completely full time. I'm also a partner in my sister's company, but where I still do manage a huge component of the financial aspect for her. So that's kind of how we tied everything all back together.
Now, before we pivot, you brought up something that's huge. And besides just the immediate financial wealth gap, and besides how do we get our money up,
Yeah.
an important aspect of all of that we all need to consider is what finances or lack thereof can do to a relationship. And your exact words just now, where you had to take a year to help somebody out of a divorce, which I'm sure was rooted in financial strain.
Yeah.
And you don't have to take our word for it. This is very Googleable, if that is a word. Go and search it up.
Yeah.
How often do people get divorced? And how many of those divorces, what percentage of that is finance related?
100%.
So talk about that besides obviously, or even include maybe moments of what you dealt with there in that year, but what, not having your finances together can do to a relationship.
Yeah, so actually one of my strongest referral partners is actually a divorce lawyer.
Wow.
And he says that all the time. One of the leading causes of divorce is money. And it could be, you go to mediation and all of a sudden every money problem comes up and it comes forward. Or it could be something as simple as you weren't accounting for anything, but now you are. Or in this case, unfortunately, she actually wasn't managing any of the finances. And this goes back to educating, right? For me, it was like, yes, you actually on paper are a very, very wealthy person. You have a ton of equity in your properties. You have a lot of places you can take money from, but the lack of education was what drove you into the ground after this divorce. And that's where it was hard to see because like when you look at the situation on paper, I was like, what happened here? Yeah. And that's when she told me I'm completely honest. My husband did everything. Sorry, her ex-husband. And so that part, obviously, because she did unfortunately drive her to the point where credits was terrible. There was a lot of arrears, so it's harder to explain something to a lender now. So it was a bit of kind of, hey, these are all the things we need to work on to get your credit up, but also be able to have a better attractive profile. And that took time for me to educate her on all the bits and pieces to kind of get her to from a 500 to at least, a 670 to then take it somewhere and get her out of, it was kind of private mortgage after like cars went into arrears and everyone coming after her. And that took a huge toll on her. Then she's going after her ex for things. It was just, for her, it was very emotional because she even said that when we finished, we got everything into a good place. She was like, I feel like I became someone I didn't ever want to be because of the financial stress that I went under with all of that. So I think that education, just like even this podcast, is the more educated you are for yourself, for your partners, what you can do together, what you want to do alone, it puts you in a better place to solve together.
To me, it seems like you're more than just a financial advisor. Like it seems like you're more like a therapist at the same time.
I was like, I guess like also with healthcare, when the shift happened, one thing I realized was yes, it's fulfilling, but part of it is because I do like to talk to people and kind of understand very wholesomely. And that's part of the reason we even recommend like talking to a broker, like doesn't need to be me, but a broker in general over the bank. Is when you go to the bank, you kind of give them, here's what it is.
Right.
And they have to take everything for face value and they can't unsee what they've already seen.
Okay.
Whereas if something comes to me and I see some gaps,
Yeah.
that's an opportunity for me because one, I do have A, B, and C lenders.
Okay.
But sometimes just because I can close you on the private side because you want me to, doesn't mean I should.
Okay.
And I think that's where I take the time and maybe like I'm very grateful where I have majority of my business built through referrals is because even if it can take me 6 months to help you understand everything, I'm going to do that before I put you into a solution just because it's a solution.
Right.
Because if I know your goals, what you intend to do, what other expenses may not be on your credit bureau but do exist. Is there other people involved or is there sometimes people are helping their parents? Right. You can't close private on a mortgage that's going to be an entire paycheck where now you're not able to fulfill the obligations you've already made in your personal life because just like that divorce, that will have a huge toll on you as an individual and your sanity.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So when we talk in finances and relationship, we had a very fiery conversation before you got here.
We go in there.
And I want to hear a female's perspective on this because I was hearing some nonsense though. Now, for a first date, this is we're just having a little fun here. This is a little off topic, but still on point, right? You got to be responsible with your finances, but there's also being a little frugal. Okay. Now, for a first date, Subanya, what would you say is a realistic expectation that either the man should be spending on you or you both should be spending together on that first date? What's a responsible answer or maybe the not responsible answer you would want?
Okay, so I'm gonna say like the general public
Yeah.
versus me, and I'll tell you why it's me.
Okay.
I was like, this is a psychological thing. The general public, I would say like the person who asked for the date. I'm also like, I think part of it is like, you know, I'm going to go into like the divine masculine, the divine feminine here a little bit, where the masculine may feel a bit like, yo, relax, like, you know, I got this. And it might also, not to say feed their ego, but kind of let them stay in their masculine role to do that. But like, that means like, you're not going to like Louis on your first date, because you might not like the person. You're like, why am I spending on this person?
I'm just checking. I see what's going on. You're not spending $10 on Island Mix, because that was an answer we got earlier. I'm not saying $10.
But maybe she likes that.
No,
You
like,
never know.
maybe that she's into
but-
that. No,
yeah,
I would get her own $10 lunch special. Like, I'm just saying. But yeah. Okay, so that's the public answer. Now what about yourself?
No, so for me, I have this, like, this is just like a bit of like, I'm not really sure what this is about. For me, it's like 50-50, or I will, because, and this is only because
It's only because
I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm like a tab tracker, where if I feel like, oh, even if I don't think there's like going to be a second date, I would be like, damn, now I'm indebted to this person, so I should probably go. So now we're equal.
There's also this thing these people do these days called ghosting. I mean, you finish the Island Mix, you just ghost.
Exactly. So then you got, if we decided like Island Mix, then yeah, that's we'll do.
How about you, JKD?
Well, my answer was
He wasn't the Island Mix one.
I wasn't the Island Mix one.
We won't disclose who it was. But I love the answer. Say it. I love my Island Mix. Don't point. Well, they can't see. I guess, yeah. But leave the man alone. What's your answer? Don't do the man.
Well, okay. I was saying between $250 and $300, just because if
Damn.
for me, like, I would want to. If this is somebody I'm really interested in, I would want to. I will kind of want to splurge.
Forget
But it's
DJ. Let me
My
get
first
into this
date,
graphic
like,
design thing and see what's going on.
Like, if this is somebody I'm really pursuing, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Like, I was thinking like Joey's, like Joey's, Moxie's,
Yeah, that's-
Milestones, because that way you're like, I'm not pushing it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But
And then
I'm including things like maybe after dinner, maybe like we go to a bowling alley or
Okay,
a
like an
pool.
activity as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So that's just the general budget you're setting.
yeah, yeah.
Understood. Because I've seen a lot of polarized answers. I see some people that anything. Let's go for a walk in the park.
Right,
it could be a
right.
$0
Yeah.
budget.
Right.
And then
Which is smart.
Exactly.
Smart
Right.
finances. Right?
smart finance, and that's why we're here, ladies and gentlemen. But on the other side of it, they might be saying, "Nah, I'm not spending all that bread. $250,
Right.
$250. That could buy me Jordans. What do you mean? What do you mean first date?
Right.
I'm not even sure I'm gonna.
Yeah.
So there's all these in between answers that we got to think about.
Right.
Me personally, I feel like 9 times out of 10 you could tell who's taking advantage of a situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
If there is a mutually beneficial, this is what we both want to do, me personally, that limit might fall within what you said.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't, like, for me, I wouldn't set that as like the barrier
barrier.
to say, this is our first date, this is how much I'm spending.
Right.
But I'm not gonna go skydiving with homegirl on the first date.
Right.
Right? And that, who knows how much that costs. But
Yeah.
that's just generally saying I'm not gonna spend some exorbitant amount of money on the first date. I would see what our mutual interests are
Right.
and put a couple options on the table. Maybe a large one, small one.
Right.
See how they operate in those spaces. If we go to Joey's, are you buying the lobster and steak
Right.
and
Right.
ordering one to go home too?
Right.
Like, let me see how you operate first, and then I could move forward. But I think in terms of relationships, the one I appreciated most was my first ex, who said exactly what you said,
Yeah.
which was like, everything has to be 50-50.
50-50.
I don't care what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that never made it. It wasn't because I wanted that, but it just never made that uncomfortable feeling between us.
Yeah.
And I always felt a settling feeling when it came to finances.
Right.
Whereas on the reverse, I felt that,
Right.
where it's like, all right, you're kind of taking advantage,
That's it.
and I could see what's going on.
Yeah.
And even at the time, they verbalized that. Like, I know 1-2 times I'll take advantage. I'm like, so you know what the hell you're doing.
Right.
All right, cool. But to me, you just gotta gauge who it is, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're comfortable, the extent of what you're willing to spend.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know. Now back into the main conversation of what we got going on here. this podcast, we are all from Toronto, right? And we didn't ask, what are your origins? Like, what's your background?
I'm Sri Lankan. Tamil.
Sri Lankan. Okay. When it comes to Toronto and Canada, one thing I noticed, especially when I realized, okay, inflation, prices of housing are going up, blah, blah, blah. The expenses are just increasing, but our wage at our jobs are not.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to figure it out at a certain point. You get to the bottleneck. And I realized when I was at the bottleneck, and I still generally am, I'm not this DJ Khaled or anything, but when I got to that point and I was trying to do research from a Canadian level, I wasn't seeing much of anything.
Yeah.
And I realized a lot of it was very Americanized and US and LLCs, which for us is, different.
Yeah.
So I want to utilize this opportunity to discuss the Canadian perspective.
Yeah.
Right? So when it comes to, let's just say, opportunities that we could utilize, like you mentioned before, the multiple credit cards.
Right.
What are some other things we could utilize to either build our credit or build our finances in general?
So I think a big one right now, and to your point about just Canadian Toronto market, is I have a lot of clients right now who are first-time home buyers or who want to be first-time home buyers, but it's just absolutely unrealistic on your own, like you said, because the income is not increasing in parallel to inflation.
Exactly.
So that's where we really try to find more of those creative opportunities, where it might mean you stay at home or you live with your parents or you rent somewhere where it makes sense. You're rooming with someone. So this client's actually a great example. He has been renting this place for almost 8 years now with the roommate. It works out to about $800 a month for him. So he's staying there. Yeah. We leveraged his first-time home buyer incentives, his opportunities, and he actually bought out in Hamilton where he could afford.
Right.
There he can afford. There he's doing the minimum down payment, and it's a duplex. So it has a legal basement and a legal main floor, where now that property is rented out. His mortgage is paid plus some. So not only is he going to be able to benefit from the appreciation. So, say you buy for $500 today, you do absolutely nothing. That property is appreciating. And that's money you can take out. The other aspect is, you are paying your mortgage down. So this is when you have 80% of the equity. So I'll use an example. So you bought the property for $500, and I'm going to say $1 million just so it's easy numbers. Not that that's going to happen, but if you wait, 5 years, that property could be $1 million now. You did absolutely nothing but pay your mortgage. And in this case, his tenants are paying his mortgage. Right. He just made $300,000 on that because he can now take out 80% of that $1 million. So doing absolutely nothing, your tenants are paying for your mortgage. He can, not only did they pay his mortgage, so any money extra that they paid, he takes out, but the $300,000 is now in his pocket. He can take it out. You can buy another property with it, right? And that's what people are doing. They're refinance buying. So you'll see when I say in the beginning, your first property is your hardest, right? Because you're positioning it as where you're going to live, that whole exercise. Yeah. Once the first property exists, the equity exists, every single other down payment usually comes from the first property. Yeah. So that's where, for a lot of our clients, you get in and it's a struggle. It's a short-term pain where you're eating at home. You're not buying coffee out anymore. You're going to do what you need to do, save that income upfront to get into that first house. But now so he bought that last year. We're actually going to be refinancing his property in a month where he's able to take out another $100,000 from the property because his mortgage is being paid down. And the Bank of Canada just announced that the rates are not changing. So we've actually almost overnight seen a spike in prices. Wow. So your 600s are becoming 700. So for him, that's all money he can access now. Wow. So that's what, in terms of like an example, my parents, the only goal is to keep paying your mortgage down because debt is scary. But it's just a matter of using the debt as good debt. Mortgage is good debt. So it's just like for my parents whose only focus was pay it down, especially, when you come from nothing to building this, you don't want to have ample amount of debt. You don't want to, you quote unquote, you don't want to leave debt for your kids or whatever that may be. But it's really kind of learning to leverage that debt to honestly take on more debt and get more assets that will cash flow for you. So now you might have 2 mortgages that are working out to $1 million of quote unquote debt. But if you're cash flowing, you're pocketing money every month. So now your day-to-day job might be, say, $50K. But if you're making money on your rental property, your income actually just it also went up in addition to the fact you own an asset. You have rental income coming in. That's expenses. Like all of these are little things, just as much as like understanding the tax implications. How could you benefit from your taxes now because you have it? So it's really just trying to learn the best way to use all of these to your advantage.
Awesome. Beautiful. So I love the fact that, we're getting into the conversation of, mortgages and properties and how that could facilitate your financial gain. But for the general person out there that may not have those things, that's starting from ground zero and is in a place right now where they're like, bro, I feel screwed. Mm-hmm. And there needs to be little pieces of the puzzle, as you said, that need to be put in place. What are some, foundation things besides obviously what we've already spoken about that, you would encourage people to look into or do?
I mean,
just to, even when it comes to, something as simple as who do you contact when it comes to something like that? Who could give more knowledge on that?
Yeah, no. And I think you should never be discouraged because honestly, I've seen some of the worst where you're just like, yeah, I don't have a chance. Like that's it. But it's really not like that. I think and even if it takes, 1-2 years, like I said, I've been working with people for several years before they get to that place, but also just kind of starting with really a budget, like managing your expenses. Like I was actually guilty of this a few years back where I had subscriptions on my credit cards that I definitely did not use anymore. Mm-hmm. So it's really just kind of honing in and taking a step back. What do my expenses look like? What is my income? And really like budgeting that to start. Look at your bills. What are absolutely necessary and what's not. And this is also just your spending, right? Like that client, you're not buying coffee every morning if you don't need to. You can pack some lunches and you'd be surprised how quickly that adds up. Especially like you said, inflation is mad real right now. Yeah. So $15 a day for lunch versus you buy some stuff at the grocery store, chicken breast, you do the same thing. And that could be your week's worth in a day or two. So just really kind of knowing what your goals are, what your budget actually looks like and what it needs to be versus what it is. Because there's always, of course, the nice to haves. And then there's like, these are mandatory, like, you need to pay for your cell phone, whatever that looks like. You may not necessarily need to finance a vehicle right now just because you have different goals and you want to focus on that first. And I think that is where it really starts. Sometimes you don't necessarily even need to talk to anyone. It's just looking at your stuff. But if your goal and your end goal is to get into a property, talk to a mortgage broker. And this is why I say don't go to the bank right away. Nothing against bank. They're amazing. They can get the job done. Absolutely. But like I said, I work with some referral partners where they tell me I can't unsee what I've seen now. Yeah. So when it comes to me, I'm not going anywhere with this information, but I can kind of tell you, hey, this is what I'm seeing. What's this about? Can we get rid of this expense? Do you actually need this expense right now? Or is it just you have 25 million subscriptions that you don't actually need? So little things like that to bring your expenses down temporarily, because the goal really is to fill that wealth gap. So you're laughing later, it's short-term pain for right now, just until you kind of fill that gap and things look better. So the first thing I always tell people, review what your actual real necessary expenses are and how can you bring those down? Because a lot of the time I have clients who will look at they'll be like, whoa. Something as simple as like how much money they spend at the bar. Mm-hmm. Like every Friday after work, you're at the bar. And especially when you're drinking, like it just keeps going. And you're like, yeah, I'm not really even I'm just tapping at that point.
Especially once you get that liquid courage and you just, another round.
Yeah, you're like, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. So like things like that, right? And he looked at it, he was like, oh, damn. It was like a Friday ritual. I was like, yo, this is this bar at the main floor of your building? And he was like, it really is. It's actually the office building. And I was like, yeah, I could tell. It seems to be like that, almost like $90. And he's like, yeah, sometimes I'll take the bill because you're feeling nice that day. So he was like, yeah, I just drink at home from time to time. And it's the nice part. It's actually a lot of the time people look at these and then they build different habits just in life, where he's like, I'm going to become a high achiever. I just want to be one of those people now. But it's not to say you can't do it, but just understanding where your money is going and how you can best leverage your money in the best way, shape, or form, whatever that needs to be. Very similarly, if you have a ton of subscriptions on one credit card, you know that one's going to high utilization. Something as simple as starting to move things around. So a couple of bills come from this credit card, a couple of bills from this credit card, but you have like basically automatic payments, right? That makes sure you're never in arrears. So those are all things that are helping you best get yourself in a place. And sometimes, honestly, you've driven yourself like so far gone where you can't even get a credit card. So that's where you kind of want to focus on just getting everything cleaned up, getting those expenses down, making sure, you know, sometimes you're chilling and spending to the point where you're going into overdraft all the time. So now your goals have changed a little bit. The focus right now is just getting a little bit of structure in your bank account. Once you've gotten that and you know they're starting to see regular pay, you're paying your phone bills on time, then you use that and you go and you ask them. So there's actually, you can get prepaid credit cards from Visa.
Okay.
This is actually a great tool for the people who, you know, you're young, wild, and free, and you did not care, and you actually are like, everyone's going to decline me. Yeah. This is a good way to build credit because you are prepaying the credit card, but it's still from Visa. So Visa is seeing that you're using this credit card, it's paid, and there you start to see like a level of responsibility there. Then they might offer you $500 credit card. Now you have 500. You do the same thing. You're making sure you use it. You're making sure you pay it. You're starting to show them, hey, you can trust me. Yeah. Then, you know, they'll offer you 700. They offer you that limit. Or you can even call in once it's been 3-4 months and you're like, you're doing a really good job, making sure your credit score is looking good. You can call in and be like, hey, is there any chance I can get a credit limit? They might offer you 200. That's still something. Yeah. And then that's just kind of the baby steps to get you to where you want to be financially before you make such a decision. And it's not, you know, real estate's not for everybody. There's several other ways, like, you know, private lending, different opportunities to make money in addition to your full-time job. Because I think the biggest thing right now is not to say that it's a rat race, but if we look at where the gap is, everyone does have some sort of a side opportunity in addition to their full-time job, which is kind of helping them fill that gap a little bit faster. If not, it's, you know, people are partnering with people, with friends, family, to still be able to do the same things that everybody else is doing. So when you can, and you trust people, you have legal documents in place. So I'll put this disclaimer out. Always have the legal documents done up front while everyone's still in good terms.
And if they don't want to sign it, that is telling.
That's a red flag.
Right.
That is telling.
Yeah. So while you guys still love each other, get the documents done.
That's a very good point,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah.
And I always, like, I'm an advocate for that.
Yeah.
While things are good,
Yeah.
Right.
now is probably a good time for therapy. Or now is probably a good time for contracts, lawyers.
Yeah.
Not when it's heated, because you're not listening.
Yeah. And like at that point, everyone feels like it's like every man for themselves now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas you did everything up front, everything, like everyone has agreed this is fair. Whereas like when push comes to shove and you didn't get things signed up front and now you're trying to sign it, to them is like, is that fair? I did this and you did this and you didn't do that and you were supposed to do this. Whereas if it's legally binding and you've discussed it, it's very clear what should have happened. And especially when money's involved, like just as much as a divorce, it can break up families, it can break up friendships. So that legal document could be a make or break for you.
Absolutely.
Nice. Speaking of the current climate that we're in, with interest rates going, or they're high. It's high. I guess what are some key advice that you can give to, like, you know, young couples who are currently renting right now and they want to move into you know, their own home maybe down the road?
So there's two things. I think one is obviously every single person is different, and right now might be a right time for someone and not everybody else. But one thing to really consider, because I know the interest rates do drive a lot of people's decisions. Yeah. But one thing is really important to note is the interest rates also drive the prices. Okay. So today's 5% will drive the prices. So if a property is $500,000 because of the current climate, because you know the demand has come down. Yeah. The second that interest rate comes down, that same $500,000 property just became $800,000. Right. So yes, the interest rate came down for you, and you may qualify for a little bit more, but that same house you don't qualify for anymore. Right. So that's where I say kind of, it's unique to everyone's circumstances. You know, like what you can afford right now, what you're looking for exactly, but it's also remembering that it's not one-to-one. And then actually, I from like my own experience, I've kind of looked into this myself. most of the time the prices go up much more than you can afford at a lower rate.
Right.
So if you can afford, then it's a good time actually when the rates are higher.
Right.
And I think it's a Warren Buffett quote, is like being greedy when people are scared is because you will reap the benefits, just like, we talked about that example
Right.
where the property appreciated. That's now equity in your pocket. So if you can afford right now,
Yeah.
and maybe it's not your dream home, it's your first home.
Right.
You get into it at 500,000. When that rate drops, one, you get a lower mortgage payment,
Right.
which is nice.
Right.
But your property pricing of that market will probably
Go
have
to-
gone up significantly. That's equity you can tap into now.
Right.
Beautiful.
Cool.
And we spoke a little bit about it earlier. As you said, you gotta monitor from both parties, relationship, family, friends, whatever. If you're going into anything, even individually, you gotta monitor your finances.
Yeah.
You gotta monitor your spending. And something you brought up was like subscriptions.
Yeah.
So an important thing, and I think this is a blanket example that almost everybody listening to this could relate to, when it comes to something like subscriptions. There's always the possibility that down the road, the subscription you might be fixed into will increase.
Yeah.
So the example I'm mentioning would be something like Netflix,
Yeah.
Amazon Prime, where now they're charging you an extra $3 on top of what you're already accustomed paying for, just so you don't see ads that they have to put in now to stay afloat.
Yeah.
That's their business model, but they have to do that to stay afloat, or we get no Netflix.
Right.
But the fact is, we as consumers now have to pay that if we want to continue to subscribe. So I say that to say, you also have to be prepared for what the future could hold.
Absolutely.
And there's a couple ways of doing that, which I want you to touch on. One would be saving, the importance of saving, as well as the importance of investing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe touch on those two.
Yeah. So I think obviously risk level is the big one for that one, where you want to put your money, where you want to lock in your money. But it's a great point. Part of it is, I think, when you're going through that budgeting exercise of this is my income, these are my expenses, this is how much I have left over. Now it comes from the leftover, what is like locked in savings and what's disposable income that you might want to have as like emergency fund or like chilling money. And then really trying to see where is your best return on that investment. So some things that people leverage, obviously, like RSPs, TFSA. So those have a small percentage of a return on those. Some people who may be knowledgeable in that space might decide, okay, we're going to go down the route of stocks, where there might be a higher return. But part of that is kind of just like inflation, trying to manage your money somewhere where it may not have the largest return. Again, is kind of based on your risk, but having some sort of a return, that because otherwise, quite honestly, if you're holding your money and doing absolutely nothing with it and inflation is happening, then your money is actually depreciating. It's going down.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's kind of the few ways. And something like I tell people there's people who have money and really terrible credit and everything else is terrible and they're not interested in even thinking about property, but lending, where it doesn't mean you have a large amount, but you and your friends might decide, like the three of you guys together, each person is going to save up 5,000, 10,000, and you can lend that money out secured. So as much as it could be 15% of a return on that, the focus now is making money on your money and really compounding what you can, so that when inflation happens, when your Netflix subscription goes up, everything else is increasing. So is the existing money that you have.
Exactly.
So like a normal person like me, if I had like, let's just say 100 grand just saved, I can actually lend it out securely?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for me, for instance, that's one of the like my main income sources, is because for me, I do see deals where I know there isn't a solution right now, but this is where it's kind of like, it could be a property where someone has purchased the property and maybe they need a down payment. Right. And my parents have a debt, like no mortgage on their house.
Right.
So for you, for instance, you can technically loan out that $100,000 against that property.
Right.
Until they can pay you off. It might be a refi. They obviously you want to make sure there's an exit that does exist.
Right.
And then you can lend that money out for 15% interest every month. That's income for you.
Right.
And then you get your 100K back as well.
Right.
So that's like a way, like obviously, like not all of us have 100K sitting around. So we do say, pool money, because all of us exist, us and our friends and everyone. If we work together, we can kind of fill that gap a lot faster than by yourself, because it is very, very difficult by yourself, especially in Toronto.
Especially here.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, Jay, could you let me a little?
I don't have that. I don't have that for you.
You have none?
I could give you $2. That's it.
Oh my gosh. Now, one very trending thing that I see these days on social media is a lot of people, especially immigrants, are now moving away from Toronto.
Yeah.
They're fed up. The pricing is ridiculous. Housing is ridiculous. Based off of your experience in the field, do you foresee things getting better?
Is there hope?
Is there hope for us, or are we screwed?
So
Let's be real to the people.
I was like, do I see it getting better in Toronto in terms of pricing? No. And the reason I say that is because we are also the job hub. So I think because one of the reasons is obviously there's been a ton of immigration, the generations even like us, like we all exist now and we want property. So the demand has increased exponentially.
Yeah.
With that being said, as much as people are moving far away, for the people who have jobs that are very specialized, they may not be able to work from home. They may be required to, like a lot of the companies during COVID said you can work from home. Now they're mandating 3 days a week. You got to be in office.
Yep.
So I have a bunch of clients who actually moved. I have a client who moved out to Kingston.
His boss, anyway. You should
That's
see him
me.
shaking his head on the side there. Yep.
Yep. So like for them, they're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So if you're lucky, you're able to rent that house out, make something, at least break even, get your mortgage paid, and then you're coming back and renting here because to your point, it's close to impossible to get here. But this is kind of a great example of using, your finances as a tool because again, they did purchase and they might need to wait a little bit. But your first home does not need to be the final home, right? Like you purchased that property, you did what you got to do, you bought with some friends, you're going to use that as a rental property, and then all of you sell it together and you benefit from those profits. But it's really finding the best way that makes sense. Like that's why you're hearing more often than not co-signers, right? Because you need that additional person helping you get to that finish line for the first piece. So you buy in Kingston, you bought it cheap, it worked for you. Unfortunately, now you're back here. You're renting here. But that property is going to appreciate. These people are paying your mortgage down. So when you sell, you might be making $200,000, $300,000 on that. That now becomes your Toronto down payment. So that same mortgage you originally got, you're getting here now in Toronto because you're putting a nice big down payment. So that's where you really, really do, like if as a mortgage broker, for me, it's understanding your end goal and helping you like navigate. It might be 1 year, 2 year, 5 years of like what makes the most sense for you for me to get you to your end goal. Because quite honestly, getting like if your goal today is Toronto, is very, very hard.
You got to come from that family.
You're coming with like your mom and dad, bank of mom and dad for sure.
Now you see, ladies and gentlemen, this is why we brought an expert.
Right.
Because Jake and I don't really know this stuff like that, but we need to.
Yeah.
Toronto, extremely expensive. We just touched on the job markets and them mandating 3 days a week and those type of things.
Yeah.
It's crazy what that period of time from 2020 to 2022 did.
Yeah.
And it really made us all have to think, right? And I say that to say, before that, it was 5 days a week and we couldn't say nothing.
Right.
Yep.
Now we get a couple of years of just showing you guys not only can we do the work, but we could do it on our terms.
Yep.
But you now have to backtrack and say, no, they're actually paying us for our time.
Yep. Yeah.
Because the reality is you could go into that job one day and do absolutely nothing the entire day. They can't just fire you on the spot.
Yep.
So they're paying you to be there for a certain amount of time. We've shown them we could do it, but if they choose that that's what they want for us to be in the office,
Yeah.
it
Exactly.
is what it is.
Exactly.
It's literally like this studio right now.
Yeah.
Imagine I invited Subanya here and she came in no, I don't like that. And that's kind of off.
Right.
And you shouldn't do this. Is this your studio
Yeah,
or
right.
my studio?
Right.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you gotta just work with it. But this is also an opportunity to say, okay, I'm a grown adult. I've shown them I can get my work done while I have obligations at home. Instead of working for somebody at bottom dollar, let me put all of that into my own business, my own finances, and focus that attention on me.
Yeah.
Just I noticed the immediate difference, and I think everybody did during those few years where you're going into a job Monday to Friday, tired, killing yourself out, you're tired every day. And then you get those few years where it's like, okay, now I could breathe.
Right.
Exactly.
I can still get the work done, but I could breathe. And it's just a reinforcement to say you should do stuff on your own terms, because they don't care that inflation is going up. Clearly.
Exactly.
The pay bump is what, cents at times?
Yeah.
Sometimes I see like all 75-cent pay bump.
Yeah.
Like, thank you, but that doesn't help when it comes to me going to Loblaws.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
honestly.
you guys really got to keep those things in mind.
And these businesses are not like they may say they're doing well, but they're not doing well, and they're finding creative ways to lay off people. I'll just say that.
Creative
ways.
It's yes. Thank you, Gerard. Have a nice life. It doesn't get much more creative than that.
Yeah.
No,
Than a
and
little
it's
severance
true.
package. Right?
It's true because, and like you said, during COVID, we've been hearing it more and more. It's like you become a number where people want the financial freedom, time freedom, and I was from the healthcare space, so we were actually in the space where my sister actually was one of the nurses. No vaccine existed, nothing existed. She had to be at work.
Wow.
So it does go to show you don't always have that control, and sometimes part of it is, like you said, doing what you can on the side to help you get to a place where you can one day have that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people found their talent during that time.
Yeah.
And they found like what they wanted to do, and they're actually flourishing in it. So
Exactly.
And that's what your job should be at the end of the day. Let your job. I think it was La Russell, hip hop artist, but he posts a lot of enthusiastic stuff like what we're talking about. And he was saying like your job is basically your first investor.
yeah.
They are that paycheck should be funding what you really want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when it conflicts, that's when you know, okay, I need to break away and focus.
Yeah.
But to take a shot in the dark, it would be nice. If you can do that, sure. But you got to be realistic with your expectations and your bills and whatnot. You got to make sure you're in check. In your experience and the amount of people you've helped, give me like 2 or 3 crazy scenarios that you've dealt with outside of the ones you've already mentioned, and how you help them get back to, on their feet.
So most of the time, I would say it's just typically what you'll see is like kind of the irresponsible spending. I think the great, as much as we like to say, maybe Canada's not helping in some ways, but in other ways, they're really great at what they do, is EI does exist. So some of the things is even EI is kind of understanding, like exactly what we said. How do you use the money you're getting to get a return on it to the best of your ability? I've actually had clients where I've told them, start putting your money into so talk to your bank immediately. What's the highest interest savings account that exists there? You have a report with them, because it's going to be hard to go to a new bank and be like, hey, I just got let go. Can I open some new stuff with you guys? So you go there, and for him, it was 4%. Whatever you can get, because EI also is like a component. It's not your full salary. Start doing that. If you got a severance, don't go crazy with your severance. Immediately put that somewhere where you get your highest return. If you got a great severance, lend it out. If not, like put it into something where you're going to start getting the highest return while you're working on obviously eventually getting back to work. Because like you said, being responsible, you still want to use your money to build the future that you want, but you still likely need a job to help you get there, unless you have friends, family, inheritances to kind of hold you over until then. I've really only had one client. It was actually very unfortunate. She was on mat leave, and only when she went to get so you can use a guaranteed letter. So you need a mortgage and you're on mat leave and you're guaranteed your job, you can use their full income. So we asked her to go get that, and they didn't give it to her.
Wow.
So this is right after COVID. So the creative way that this person was let go was the company was restructuring. And the role no longer existed for her. So not only does she have, not to say a new expense, but her expenses have changed because she does have a child. But her EI is going to end, her mat leave EI is going to end, and she doesn't have a job guaranteed when she gets back. And she found out through this that she's being laid off. Wow. So that was where she was like, CCB, EI, start putting it into, so she got a Scotia high interest saving. Every dollar she could move into that, she was very, very frugal during that time. She would joke around like, thank God I can't go out. Everything was starting to go into that while she was going through the process of looking for a new job and doing what she needed to get there. But it was just, like you said, being very, very smart with the funds you have, just knowing that that is going to be what's going to basically get you to your end goal, and knowing it's going to fuel something else.
Very interesting. Something that's a hot topic these days that I've been seeing floating around is lending money.
Yeah.
So not the legit way that you guys were just talking about or the legal way, but let's just say you're doing all of this now. You're building this savings, you're building a investment portfolio, etc. And now you have people that are seeing you do this. They're going through something, and their way of going about it is, hey, yo, lend me. Can I get a? Well, what's your advice when it comes to lending money to family and friends?
So this goes kind of back to just have this process as a rule. Like the easiest way, I know it's you don't want to do this. My money is with my lawyer. My lawyer will draft something up. This is just something I always do because sometimes I get it. Like family gets offended. They're like, "What do you mean?" But you always want to have something while you're good, because if you're not good and you're going back after, this is not the headache that you wanted. This is not the bridge you want to die on. So for me, it's happened where if I need to lend it, and thankfully for me, I actually do keep my money with my lawyer. So my lawyer will draft whether it's a promissory note, it's a document that's legally binding us, and there's something for me to fall back on if something happens. Of course, like we try to keep it as mutual as possible. If I understand circumstances changes, I will do everything I can while I can to help in whatever way, shape, or form. But at the end of the day, you've done and you've worked really hard for this as well, not to lose it overnight, just kind of trying to be like the savior Mother Teresa for somebody else, because the end goal obviously being that you need this for yourself, right?
Yeah.
You're working hard every single day to be able to build something for yourself. If you can help now, and I'm one of those people who, I'll be honest, I'm one of the higher risk lenders, and I say that because I do sometimes lend with my emotions, because I think if I have an opportunity where I'm in a position to help, I'm very grateful to be in a position where I am able to maybe help someone who may not be in a great position today, and I'll take my L if I need to, not that I want to, but I do believe that whenever I give, I gain. So if I can, I will. But that doesn't mean my lawyer is not going to draft a document for you.
Right.
Absolutely, because then you run into expectations.
Exactly.
Like you're expected to get that money back at a certain time.
Yeah.
May not happen because
Exactly.
they're going through whatever. So
Exactly.
documenting everything, pivotal.
Yeah.
Very important.
And while you're good, like if I'm happy, you're happy, you sign it, we're happy with mutual understanding and it's done, versus like now has hit the fan and now we're like, now I'm lawyering up on you is how you're going to see it, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not answering calls, all them things.
Yeah.
I do have one quick question about going back to the mortgage side. I believe it's called HELOC.
Yes.
Can you pay your mortgage with HELOC? It's technically like a line of credit,
Yes.
right? Can you pay off your mortgage with that?
So because it's a HELOC, it's a home equity line of credit.
Okay.
So it's actually charged against your property.
Okay.
It is
okay.
almost a mortgage component.
Okay.
So it's not to say you can't pay your mortgage. So Scotiabank, for instance, has a mortgage that has a mortgage and a HELOC.
Okay.
So the bare minimum, you always have to have 20% down. But
Okay.
what that means is every time I make a payment, so I'll use that $1 million as an example. $1 million, $800,000 mortgage, or say I have a $400,000 mortgage and $400,000 HELOC.
Okay.
I can use my HELOC to pay my mortgage.
Yeah.
But that means my HELOC is getting
Yeah,
bigger now.
right.
So it's always going to be charged against your property. So yes, you can use it to pay your mortgage.
Right.
And HELOCs are interest only.
Okay.
So that's where sometimes people like to use the HELOC, because your mortgage is interest and principal. So that monthly payment
Right.
is larger
It's
than
done
just
as-
the interest. So
right.
it happens during COVID.
Okay.
We saw it a lot where people use their HELOC
Okay.
because they want to keep that payment low because things got tough. Like
Right.
interest rate went up. They weren't expecting it. Expenses. People got let go from work.
Right.
You went from a 2% interest rate to 7%. You're like, what the?
Right. Right.
So you want to keep that payment low, and then hoping that when the rates come down, you bring it all together.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
Now we're talking about planning, right? And building a blueprint to financial freedom and building generational wealth. But one thing I've learned, especially developing my career the way that I have, is that no matter how hard you plan sometimes ish hits the fan.
Yep.
And a very important topic that I think would be a great one to almost end off on would be when it comes to making this huge plan and planning your finances and doing things the right way. Sometimes somebody called a scammer comes along and screws you over.
Yeah.
So it could be the situation where you don't get the money back from lending it to so-and-so and you might need it now. But there's also those scenarios where, let's just say you get a call from the bank and they're saying, oh, we need your social insurance number because there's something wrong with your account. You give that and now everything's screwed.
Yeah.
What are some ways of, one, looking out for that, two, preventing it, And 3, if it should happen, how do you get yourself out of that hole?
So one thing is like always be like identity theft is so real. Right now, I actually have several mortgage clients where we submit their mortgage, and that's when they found out that they were like, oh, apparently I'm flagged for something of the sort. So being very, very careful. And it kind of just goes back to constantly managing and if every month you're like, this is my budget, this is my expenses, you're constantly looking at your account. Slight variance, you call it out.
Right.
Because it happens, and honestly, some of the ways that you see it is like small amounts of money are leaving your account, or like a subscription. You're like, what is that?
Right.
Because it has such an odd name that you almost miss it, and then before it's like 1, 2 things, and the third time it's like a very large amount that's leaving. So I think it's just being very, very vigilant, and it really comes down to, like you said, you can only plan so much, but just being vigilant and staying on top of your finances will kind of be the make or break for you.
Right.
And it happens. We've seen it where people lost everything.
Yep.
And it's very, very easy. And like, obviously it takes a huge toll on you, on your mindset, your mentality. Like it'll be a huge mental health toll when something like that happens, but not going into the spiral of like, screw this.
Yeah.
But it depends too, right? Because I hear what you're saying completely, and it's amazing for everybody to understand that. But like, I was watching the news literally this week. It was a woman in her 80s.
Yeah.
I guess got a call about crypto or something. She emptied her bank account, gave the person 80,000, and now has nothing to her name. Yeah. So something like that is like traumatizing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are the kind of key things that to also consider. You know, not everybody is in a place where they're 20 something and could bounce back, right? And that's something very important to note.
Yeah.
But for anybody, you know, older that might be listening, maybe focus more on the initial part of being aware of what's out there. Yeah. Understanding, because I've even gotten screwed one time.
Yeah.
Luckily, it didn't go too far.
Yeah.
But I just remember, I don't even think I've ever told this story on here. It was one time I was just so tired from work. Mm-hmm. Came home from work, and it was one of them. Family was in the backyard. I went inside, changed my clothes, and I looked at my email, and I got an email from Apple, but they photoshopped or edited the email where it looks like an Apple email. So it says something about your account is this. Click here to fill in something, and when you send it to us, we'll fix the account. At that point, because I was so tired that day, I wasn't thinking.
Right. Yeah.
And I literally filled out everything, including my social insurance number. And I was like, it was just that level of tiredness. Yeah. And it's literally when I hit submit, my heart sunk into my stomach, and I'm like, oh shoot. I had to go call my bank one time. They put me in touch with, I think, Equifax, who put a red flag on my account. Yeah. And that was just to prevent any suspicious behavior for, I think, 3 years. Yeah. So now I'm okay. But at that time, I was like, oh my God. And that's me being like somebody who's hip to know what's going on these days. Yeah. I could only imagine my mom and dad opening something and like fully filling out everything and not thinking twice. Yeah. Or just anybody of that age. So these things are key.
Yeah, and it's becoming a thing, because I remember now what they're doing, especially because my church does it, where they actually have programs now where they invite older folks to come, and they actually teach them how to prevent these things from happening to them. Nice. But I think there should be more of those things throughout, like not just at church. Yeah. It should be at community centers, all types of areas that it should be at.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. And one big thing you both kind of touched on, never, ever give anyone your SIN information.
Yeah.
Believe
that, me. No. And it's true, because like, honestly, like, because I'm now in the space, I can recognize how much power that has. Yeah. But prior to that, myself included, I would be like, if someone, like my bank called and asked me, I probably would give it to them over the phone.
Email.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, no problem. Like, here's the card number. You need the CCV, no problem. So that's where it's like, again, it goes like, if you're not educated, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. Right. And it's exactly what you said is that, but the SIN is a big one. Yeah. That's like, if for anyone who's watching this older or younger, if anyone's asking you for your SIN number, that's a huge red flag. Yeah. That kind of, you need to do your extra layer of due diligence at that point if they're asking for it. And if it's a bank, go and branch if you're suspicious. And another thing you can do, if at any point you do think something is suspicious, you're monitoring your finances, you can add a flag on Equifax, like you said, as a way to mitigate everything up front. You can do that at any point. And that ultimately, if any inquiry shows up, it can be a bank account, it could be a credit card, it can be a phone, even because people are buying phones on identities. You will get a phone call that you have to approve it.
Yeah. So there's times where I've actually like hung up the phone on an actual CRA agent because I'm thinking that it's a scam.
Yeah.
And they actually call me back. They're like, no, it's not a scam. It's actually us. Like,
Yeah, you're like, prove it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Definitely got to say beautiful episode today. And I know for a fact the people listening definitely got a lot of value out of this one. So I definitely want to say thank you to you.
Thank you. Thank you guys.
For taking the time to come on and educate.
Thank you guys for putting together something like this. I think I see great value in it. Being someone who works with people every single day, we obviously kind of do see that gap exists. And I love that you guys are doing this. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Definitely trying to be proactive in the community, you know? So very important stuff, guys. Any last, anything we might have missed that you think is important or any last words you want to give the people?
I think honestly, you guys covered a bunch of the key components, but if at any point, not to say that like I do way more than my job, but I think it really does come down to going to a subject matter expert if you don't know to get the information you need. So if you need a referral to a subject matter expert, or if you need someone to talk to, holla at your girl.
Okay. I was waiting for the plug.
Subanya Karan at Subanya Karan.
At Subanya Karan. So we'll put the information on the screen so you guys can actually see it, and it'll be in the comment section down below. If it's not you, obviously there might be people that might not be able to reach you per se.
Yeah.
What is that thing they would type in Google?
Honestly, I think a great starting point is your mortgage broker. And the reason I say that is you might not even be looking for a mortgage for a while, but they can help you kind of put together the financial ecosystem. And they probably have someone to refer you to. Like if your taxes are behind or you didn't do your taxes properly, or you can benefit from some different incentives in taxes, they probably got a good accountant for you. You need a financial planner. You need someone to help you with your insurance. Like we probably got a guy for that.
Right.
One-stop shop.
Yeah.
So if anybody's in a financial strain, you might be looking for a way to get out of it and you want advice or just somebody to kind of steer the ship.
Exactly.
Subanya is here first and foremost, but you would type in mortgage broker and then maybe whatever city you're from.
Exactly, because it's always obviously like nice to be able to put even a face to the person you're talking to and kind of just put what I say is like, be as honest as you need to be. Tell me everything. Because anything that you don't tell me and comes up later, I can't protect you. Right. So it's just, as long as you need to be, don't be discouraged, because honestly, people with nothing find a way. It's just a matter of like you said, planning and kind of figuring out how you can collaborate, right? Like if it means you can't do it on your own, there's probably someone you can do it with, but there's almost always a way, because you'll be surprised if you look at these people, you're like, where you started from and how you got there. There's always a story. And if our families can come from like immigrants from like literally a country where they like my parents didn't even know English. Wow. So to build something without doing a damn word here, what's our excuse?
Yeah.
so
tell her everything. Right. Don't leave anything out.
Yeah.
So that
except the SIN number.
So that
I'll get that on your tax document.
So that OnlyFans subscription, cancel it, bro.
Yeah, I was like, I will see your bank statements.
But the craziest part is the money's coming into his account from OnlyFans.
Okay.
He actually does OnlyFans.
No, honestly, I have a client.
All up on OnlyFans. I heard about it, but
I have a client who's making good money.
Yeah.
And honestly, like now the mortgage lenders are accepting it. It's like exotic artists
making money from OnlyFans.
Yeah, they fall under exotic artist.
Artist.
I did not know that.
You just need like a 1 year average though. So and honestly,
I think you had like 8 months.
Yeah.
9 months.
As long as you got a year, some consistent deposits.
You have me thinking though. So
his wife was joking around with him on some. You should put your feet on OnlyFans. So I've been teasing him about it ever since. But I'm sure he must have listened to it.
No, definitely not.
Anyways, people, it's been another episode of the Up From Here podcast. Make sure to subscribe, follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spotify.
Yes, sir.
Make sure to follow us on whatever streaming platform you like best, but YouTube is the best experience in its totality. Keep along with the program, the point of the Up From Here podcast. Tune in, listen to our experiences, listen to our experienced guests, our leaders of their fields and people who are in practice of their fields that have stories to share. And the point is to listen to those stories. And once you hear all the horror stories,
All right.
it's only up from here.
Yep.
That's the Up From Here podcast. Thank you, Sabanya.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
both.
you.
All right.
And we'll see you guys on the next one. We out.
Peace.